You talked last week about how tech issues often aren't handled in game reviews, and in particular, it's rare for a review to be able to comment on performance on quote-unquote minimum spec platforms because reviewers often have top-of-the-line machines. What do you think of how IGN and Eurogamer handle this? Is there any scope for DF to assist, e.g. the potential for a sidebar box besides an article sketching out broad performance at min/recommended/high levels or linking to more detail? Alternatively, if you designed such a box and licensed the very brief summary for use by indie reviewers, I wonder how many might voluntarily add besides some of their reviews on condition of linking to your video for a fuller picture. This is an interesting comment, right? I mean, I guess the problem we have is that technical reviews take time, and often we get PC games like, on the day of launch or a couple of days before. I suppose you could have a recommended box that was given to reviewers, but typically they do review on their own systems, and there's an infinite combination of potential components that could be within those systems. Do they actually review on high-end, though? Eurogamer
I don't know about that.
Eurogamer does not.
No. It's often been to the point where, in internal conversations, when there's been some comments about a PC version of the game, literally the first question we ask is, what are they playing it on? And then we refer to the recommended specs, and then we refer to our own knowledge of the game if we've got it. Yeah, it's tricky for sure. What do you think, John?
I mean, it's as you say, when... First of all, I don't think we have enough bandwidth to support reviewers of all these different games, right? Like, if somebody wants to ask advice, that's one thing, but we can't really chime in on too many things. And I think that's where, I think for big games, having DF integrated as a little side bar thing could be interesting and useful, but for most games it's not really feasible, right? And we do our own coverage anyway, but we can't cover every game.
The sidebar is doable, but it would involve people understanding that that sidebar might not be there on the embargoed review.
Correct.
There's also that,
right. So that's another thing to think about. But reviewers, they review on what they got, and usually with game reviews, in most cases, you kind of just have to roll with what the publisher wants to give you. Yeah. Right? Like a lot of times we have issues where it's like Alex is waiting to cover a PC version of a game and we just don't have the PC version yet, which delays that content, right? Sometimes it does come in on PC, but then you have a situation like you said where somebody will be playing on a very low end machine and they'll say, oh man, this PC version is so bad. And we're like, what are you playing it on? My toaster that I found under the fridge. Oh, well, I'm sorry. That's not going to work. Not that everybody should be on high-end machines, but it's, there's that line where it's like, if you're criticizing the performance of something, you should at least kind of know the facts. And if you're playing on a very low-spec machine, it's worth saying, I played on a low-spec machine and my experience was bad, right? But you can't pigeonhole the whole game as like, oh, this PC version is bad because of this, right? So if, it's useful in that I guess people can at least, if they're reviewing it, they can come to us internally and ask questions like that. Like, hey, I'm seeing this. Is this normal? And we can potentially help there. So
there's, I don't think, I mean, John, the bandwidth thing, like I'm strapped as is. And, I think the one thing, so if it's not like a link to a DF article, which I think Eurogamer does try and do at some points.
Yep.
And I think, the one thing that a reviewer of a PC game could just really easily test out is just like maybe 3 or 4 things. Okay, so arbitrary frame rates. Can you uncap the frame rate above and get to like 200, for example? Why not? That's the thing you could put in a sidebar. Does it support ultra wide? You can fake ultra wide resolutions on even a 16:9 monitor to test that. Takes about less than 5 minutes. Okay. And then, does 30 seconds of play, is it interrupted every 30 seconds of play with some sort of hitch? Think most people could reasonably answer that question or something like that. I think it'd be pretty hard to condense a PC review video into a sidebar without it having already been made. that's the hard part. Like even mid production, I'm still like grappling with a lot of things, so that I can only offer like partial, other than like the most obvious things, I can't offer up a lot, especially anything about like potential performance on a mid-range spec PC. Usually like mid review, I'm still like doing all that, so right. I don't even know. It's hard.
Let me put a concept forward, Alex, which might be intriguing. Or could just
intriguing.
Be shot down. Let's say we have a standardized series of PCs, right? Starts with Steam Deck, then you've got something like a Ryzen 5 3600 with a 3060, and then you've got like a 4090, and then you just do a playthrough of like the first, let's say, 15 to 30 minutes of the game on each of those systems. You've got your RTSS or CapFrameX data running on each of those things. You should be able to have at least a view on whether the game is broken or not, based on just that data.
The frame time graph for that 30 minutes extrapolated out.
Yeah.
Place
side by
side
with those. Yeah, that's an interesting concept that might work, but it's surface level stuff, because you won't have explanations of what's going on. You'd have to, I guess, sort of add low, medium, high settings to whichever of the systems you've got going there. You'd have to assume a certain resolution level. So you're already limiting the data, but you would, in theory, see stuff like stutter struggle, traversal stutter, all manner of weird stuff that can happen, and you can correlate it across those systems to see whether it's repeatable. So I guess there is that, but you're still looking at a day's work there, at least for this very surface level stuff.
For something at the end of the day, which like that the day's work, and then it goes into a sidebar, like a little box, and it's like, is that day's work better put into the box, or is it better put into a video?
Mm-hmm.
And you have to like think about return.
Yeah,
I don't like thinking about return sometimes because I'm bad at that calculus. I think Rich is better at it. But I think in that case, I would rather be putting that one day's work maybe into a segment on DF Direct instead.
Yeah, sure. Or it would be something that you just don't do at all. You would just do your main review as per normal. Yeah. You would have a guy who would have the 3 systems and would produce that work, and we would check it out. So
that's another thing.
Yeah. But there's so many things that can happen. I mean, it doesn't happen so much these days, but day one drivers can, historically they have caused issues for us if we aren't using them on for our reviews. I think the classic one was probably Doom 2016 on AMD back in the day. It just got like a game-changing improvement via a driver update. But it doesn't really happen so much. It's more sort of iterative improvements these days. Really,
that makes me think of Rage, which is always my go-to.
Yes.
When I bought Rage on PC, but I had an AMD Radeon, it was the 5870, and it was like 100% unplayable. Like you could not play it. Totally broken. But I wanted to play Rage so bad that night that I actually bought the PS3 version.
Oh geez. I mean, well, at least you kind of got 60. I mean, it was a pretty
stable 60 on PS3.
Yeah.
On the graphics card, it was not playable.
Why didn't you play it on 360?
I think it was. I know the reason I went PS3 is I was like, oh, I'm eventually going to play this on PC, but I was like, the PS3 is really bad at these types of things, and I wanted to see, like, did John Carmack and crew actually get this to run at 60? I think it was more like the curiosity got me, where I was like, I want to see how this
John Carmack fixed the PS3.
And they did a good job, I would say.
It was all right.
It's better on 360, but it's pretty good on PS3 still.
Isn't that game like at times like 640 by 360 on the consoles?
I mean, it was one of the first big pushes for dynamic res. Well, aside from Riddick on the original Xbox, which also was dynamic res. But
I might be wrong, but I think PS3 would go down to a minimum of 640 by 720.
Okay.
Yeah, not 360. That would be
not that low. Not that
low. I definitely remember some hardcore scaling, at least, on the one axis. That's another thing with PS3 games, the single axis scaling.
So
I
weird.
always thought that was weird.
There's a bunch of those 960 by 1080 games, I think, out there.
Right.
Yeah. The idea of someone else doing that with like my supervision, as in I just like look at it afterwards and I say that looks fine. I think that's much more reasonable for me.
I think it could possibly fill a gap. But, you do stand the chance that things might emerge within your testing that aren't in that initial testing. And then you get, the lynch mobs demanding to know why we didn't notice it earlier. And it's an entirely different regimen.